Lauren, a biased flight attendant, unfairly targets retired Black General Malcolm Turner, accusing him of not belonging in first class. Confident her actions will be overlooked, she sets off a chain of events that uncover deep biases and lead to a powerful reckoning. Stay with us until the end to see how one moment of prejudice became a turning point for justice, dignity, and lasting change. Before we dive in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If you're inspired by real-life stories of resilience and transformation, make sure to like, share, and follow for more. Let's get started. Malcolm Turner, a retired Black four-star general, walked steadily through Newark Liberty International Airport, EWR. At 72 years old, he carried himself with calm confidence, a demeanor shaped by decades of leading troops and tackling global challenges. The terminal buzzed with activity, families wrangling energetic children, businesspeople juggling laptops and coffee, and tourists snapping last-minute photos. Amidst the commotion, Malcolm moved with quiet focus, fully prepared for the journey ahead. Malcolm Turner, dressed in a crisp navy blazer over a white t-shirt, exuded quiet elegance as he strode through the terminal. His well-fitted jeans and comfortable leather loafers added to his commanding yet approachable appearance. On his left wrist, a simple yet dignified watch glinted under the airport's fluorescent lights, a relic from his years of service. Though his attire was modest, the way he carried himself made him stand out among the crowd. He carried with him a single leather briefcase, its surface worn but polished, a relic from his years of service. Inside was a journal, a small tablet, and a neatly folded copy of his speech for the gala awaiting him in Los Angeles. The fundraiser, organized to support scholarships for the children of veterans, was an event Malcolm considered one of his most important endeavors. Since retiring from active duty, he had dedicated himself to causes that uplifted those who had served their country, believing that their sacrifices deserved more than fleeting gratitude. Yet, Malcolm's retirement had not been without challenges. Like many veterans, he had faced the silent battle of PTSD upon returning to civilian life. The memories of combat, of loss, sacrifice, and the weight of command were not easily left behind. But through resilience, therapy, and a steadfast belief in purpose, Malcolm had transformed his struggles into fuel for advocacy. His Foundation's programs were as much a testament to his leadership as they were to his understanding of the hardships many veterans endured daily. For Malcolm, the bond with the military was unbreakable. As he often reflected, you can take a soldier out of the army, but you can't take the army out of the soldier. This belief shaped his identity and fueled his dedication to advocacy. What civilians don't understand, and what scumbags will never comprehend, he had once confided to a fellow veteran, is that veterans never truly leave the forces. It's in their hearts and mindset, part of who they are forever. These reflections kept his mission clear: to honor those who had served and to ensure they received the dignity and respect they deserved. Reaching Gate B-17, Malcolm handed his boarding pass to the attendant. She glanced briefly at the ticket, her expression polite but perfunctory. "Thank you, sir. Enjoy your flight," she said with a professional smile, returning the pass. Malcolm offered a courteous nod. "Thank you." Stepping onto the jet bridge, Malcolm allowed himself a moment to appreciate the small privileges of first-class travel, a stark contrast to the cramped military transports he had grown accustomed to during his decades of service. The comfort, however, was secondary. For Malcolm, travel was a means to an end, a way to connect with people and further the causes he believed in. Taking his assigned seat in 2B, Malcolm placed his briefcase under the seat in front of him. The leather-bound journal emerged shortly after, its eagle insignia a quiet testament to the life he had left behind but never truly abandoned. He opened it to a fresh page, his pen gliding smoothly as he jotted down thoughts for his speech. The notes were concise yet impactful, reflecting the precision that had been his hallmark as a leader. At the rear of the first-class cabin, Lauren Evans observed the boarding process with a critical eye. It was her third month working as a flight attendant, and while she had grown comfortable with the routine, there were moments that still unsettled her. This, apparently, was one of them. Lauren Evans wasn't someone who sought conflict lightly. Just weeks earlier, a coworker had faced disciplinary action for failing to catch a fraudulent ticket, and the incident had left a lasting impression on Lauren. Determined not to repeat her colleague's mistake, she often erred on the side of overcaution. Her gaze lingered on Malcolm longer than it should have. There was something about him, the way he carried himself, his calm yet commanding demeanor, that made her pause. First class, in Lauren's experience, was typically filled with business executives or affluent leisure travelers. Malcolm didn't fit the mold. Her colleague, Samantha, noticed Lauren's distraction. "What's up?" Samantha asked, leaning slightly toward her. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Lauren said quickly, brushing off the question. "Just keeping an eye on things." Samantha followed Lauren's gaze. "He looks fine to me. Probably one of those quiet types who won't ask for anything." Lauren forced a smile, but her unease didn't dissipate. Straightening her posture, she adjusted her uniform and walked down the aisle. Malcolm, engrossed in his notes, didn't notice Lauren until she stopped beside his seat. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice polite but firm. "May I see your boarding pass?" Malcolm looked up, surprised but unbothered. "Of course," he replied, slipping the ticket from his jacket pocket. His movements were unhurried, calm, as though he were accustomed to scrutiny. Lauren examined the pass, her eyes narrowing slightly as though searching for something out of place. Satisfied, she quickly masked her expression and handed the pass back. "Thank you," she said, her tone brisk, "just making sure everything's in order." Malcolm nodded, his tone even. "No problem." As Lauren walked away, Malcolm returned to his journal, but the moment had not gone unnoticed. Across the aisle, David Mitchell, a businessman in his early 50s, had been observing the exchange. His sharp eyes followed Lauren as she returned to the galley, his expression hardening. "She's profiling him," David thought, his jaw tightening. He had seen this kind of behavior before, and it never sat well with him. The flight was scheduled to depart in 15 minutes. Malcolm closed his journal, unaware that his journey was about to take an unexpected turn. As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, the cabin settled into a tranquil rhythm. The soft hum of the engines provided a comforting backdrop as passengers adjusted their seats, opened laptops, or browsed through magazines. Malcolm, having set aside his journal, gazed momentarily out the window at the expanse of clouds, their soft edges illuminated by the midday sun. The view offered a fleeting moment of serenity, a stark contrast to the tension simmering beneath the surface of the cabin. Malcolm turned back to his notes, his pen gliding across the page with a practiced ease. Each word carried the weight of his experience, shaped by decades of leadership and the personal battles he had faced since retiring. Across the aisle, David Mitchell shifted in his seat, occasionally stealing glances at Malcolm. David sensed that the man seated near him was one of quiet strength, a reserved and reflective individual whose demeanor bore the calm wisdom of age. Samantha moved through the economy cabin, her movements fluid and efficient. Her voice carried a warm professionalism as she interacted with passengers, addressing each request with genuine attention. Meanwhile, in the first-class cabin, Lauren had taken charge of the drink service. Her hands gripped the cart tightly as she approached the rows, her smile polite but lacking the natural warmth that Samantha exuded. As Lauren began serving the first-class passengers, Malcolm noticed her methodical pace. She paused at each row, engaging briefly with the occupants, but her demeanor seemed detached, as if she were performing a duty rather than offering a service. When Lauren reached his seat, her hesitation was palpable. She lingered for a fraction of a second, her eyes flicking toward him before quickly moving on. The cart rolled past Malcolm without stopping, the sound of the wheels against the carpet punctuating the silence. Malcolm leaned back slightly, his expression calm but contemplative. He watched Lauren's retreating figure with quiet curiosity. Years of experience had taught him to read people, and Lauren's body language spoke volumes. Her movements were deliberate, her gaze avoiding his, and her actions seemed guided by more than mere oversight. Interesting, Malcolm thought, his mind noting the small but telling details. He chose not to react immediately, letting the moment pass without confrontation. For Malcolm, patience was not just a virtue, it was a strategy. On Lauren's return trip, her actions confirmed Malcolm's observations. She continued serving drinks to the passengers behind him, her tone professional but devoid of warmth. The contrast between her demeanor toward others and her behavior toward him was stark. Malcolm's patience had its limits. As Lauren passed by a second time without acknowledging him, he decided to speak. His voice, calm and steady, carried just enough authority to command attention. "Excuse me," Malcolm said, his words cutting through the ambient noise of the cabin. "Could I get a glass of water, please?" Lauren stopped abruptly, her grip on the cart tightening. She turned to face him, her expression carefully neutral but betraying a flicker of irritation. "I'll need to head back to the galley," she said quickly, her tone clipped. "We might be out of non-carbonated drinks up front." Her response was odd, especially considering the fully stocked cart she had been pushing moments earlier. Without waiting for a reply, she turned and wheeled the cart toward the galley. The exchange did not go unnoticed. Across the aisle, David Mitchell sat up straighter, his frown deepening. He had been observing Lauren's behavior since boarding, and her actions toward Malcolm only confirmed his suspicions. Leaning slightly toward Malcolm, David spoke in a low voice, his tone edged with concern. "That wasn't normal. She's treating you differently." Malcolm offered a faint smile, his tone measured. "It's nothing I haven't dealt with before." In the rows ahead, passengers began whispering among themselves. A middle-aged woman in the second row glanced back at Malcolm, her expression a mix of curiosity and sympathy. Her companion, a man in a tailored suit, shook his head slightly, his lips pressed into a thin line. The tension in the cabin was subtle but undeniable. What had begun as a routine flight was now marked by an undercurrent of unease. Malcolm turned his attention back to his notes, but his thoughts lingered on the interaction. Lauren's behavior reminded him of countless moments in his life where judgment preceded understanding, where appearances outweighed accomplishments. He glanced out the window again, the endless expanse of clouds reflecting the quiet resolve he carried within him. "This is just another challenge," he thought, his grip tightening on the pin. And challenges are meant to be met head-on. As the cabin settled once more, Malcolm resolved to let the situation play out naturally. He had faced far greater obstacles in his life, and he knew that this moment, while troubling, would not define him. Across the aisle, David continued to watch Lauren with a wary eye, ready to step in if needed. The tension between Lauren's actions and Malcolm's composed demeanor creating an unspoken narrative that many in the cabin had begun to notice. The tranquility of the clouds outside stood in stark contrast to the simmering undercurrents within. The hum of the engines served as a steady backdrop to the rising tension in the cabin. Malcolm, seated upright in 2B, had returned to his journal, his pen moving methodically across the page. His notes for the evening's gala were clear and concise, but even as he wrote, a shadow of distraction clouded his focus. The earlier interaction with Lauren, though seemingly minor, left an impression. Something about her tone and hesitation hinted at more than routine protocol. Meanwhile, Lauren stood near the galley, speaking in hushed tones to Natalie, the head flight attendant. Lauren's unease had morphed into a determination to act on her instincts. "Natalie," Lauren began, her voice low but insistent, "I think there's something off about the passenger in 2B. Natalie raised an eyebrow. "The older gentleman? He's been quiet the whole flight. What's the issue?" Lauren hesitated, glancing toward the first-class cabin. I don't think he belongs here." Natalie's expression turned incredulous. "Lauren, his ticket was scanned at the gate, and he's sitting in the seat assigned to him. That's all we need to know." "But something doesn't feel right," Lauren pressed. "Can't we verify his ticket one more time? Just to be sure." Natalie sighed heavily, clearly annoyed by Lauren's persistence. "Fine, but make it quick, and don't cause a scene. If you're wrong, you need to let this go." Lauren approached Malcolm's seat with clipboard in hand, her steps brisk and purposeful. Malcolm noticed her from the corner of his eye and set down his pen, his expression calm but questioning. "Sir," Lauren began, her tone polite but firm, "can I ask how you purchased your ticket?" Malcolm tilted his head slightly, his sharp gaze meeting hers. "I booked it directly through the airline's website," he replied evenly. Lauren nodded, jotting something on her clipboard. "And how did you pay for it?" With my personal credit card, Malcolm said, his tone steady. Is there a reason for these questions? Lauren hesitated, her discomfort evident. It's just standard procedure, sir. Thank you for your cooperation. Malcolm remained composed, though a flicker of annoyance crossed his features. If this is standard procedure, he said quietly, it seems oddly targeted. Before Lauren could respond, a voice from across the aisle broke the growing tension. Excuse me, David Mitchell said, his voice carrying across the cabin. Is there a reason this man is being singled out? All eyes turned toward David, whose expression was one of barely restrained indignation. Lauren stiffened, clearly caught off guard by the interruption. I'm just following procedure, Lauren said, her tone defensive. Procedure? David repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. This man is General Malcolm Turner, a retired Army general and a philanthropist. I've read about him. What exactly do you think he's done wrong? The murmurs among the passengers grew louder, a mix of curiosity and growing discomfort with the unfolding situation. Natalie, alerted by the commotion, quickly made her way down the aisle. What's going on here? Natalie asked, her tone sharp as she addressed Lauren. Lauren, visibly flustered, turned to her supervisor. I was just verifying his information. That's enough, Natalie said firmly, cutting her off. Turning to Malcolm, her tone softened. Mr. Turner, I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. There's no reason for this to continue. Malcolm inclined his head slightly. Thank you. I appreciate your intervention. Natalie turned back to Lauren, her expression stern. Lauren, return to the galley. Now. As Lauren retreated, the tension in the cabin remained palpable. Malcolm picked up his journal, his expression calm but reflective. Across the aisle, David leaned slightly toward him. General Turner, David said, his tone quiet but firm, I hope you don't mind me stepping in. I couldn't stand by and watch that happen. Malcolm looked up, a faint smile touching his lips. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, David replied. David Mitchell. I'm a businessman, but I've followed your work for years. It's an honor to meet you. The honor is mine, Malcolm said, and your support was much appreciated. The two men exchanged a handshake, their brief interaction carrying a sense of mutual respect. But as Malcolm returned to his notes, it was clear the incident had left an impression, not just on him, but on everyone in the cabin. Passengers whispered quietly among themselves, some casting sympathetic glances toward Malcolm, others exchanging knowing looks. The disruption had passed, but the unease lingered, like a faint tremor after an earthquake. The cabin settled once again into relative quiet. Samantha, ever the professional, brought Malcolm a glass of water and offered a warm smile. If there's anything else you need, sir, don't hesitate to ask, she said. Thank you, Malcolm replied, his tone kind but measured. But as the retired general sipped the water and glanced briefly at the cabin around him, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. It wasn't the questions or the interruptions that lingered. It was the subtle reminder that, even now, dignity was something he had to defend. Yet, Malcolm didn't let his thoughts linger too long. With the steady resolve of a soldier, he shook his head slightly, as if brushing off the negativity. Turning his focus back to the notes in his journal, the seasoned leader reminded himself of the purpose of his journey. The gala was more than just an event. It was an opportunity to further his mission for the countless veterans who looked to him for leadership. The faint hum of the engines became a backdrop to his concentration as General Turner began refining his speech. In the quiet moments, he found clarity, channeling the energy of the incident into his work. For the retired general, challenges were not distractions. They were fuel for action. The tension in the first-class cabin had eased somewhat, but it was far from forgotten. Malcolm, seated upright in 2B, had returned to his journal. Across the aisle, David Mitchell kept a watchful eye on the situation, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp. Other passengers exchanged whispered speculations, their curiosity ignited by the unusual interaction. Near the galley, Lauren stood with arms crossed, her jaw set in defiance. Natalie, the head flight attendant, faced her with an expression that brooked no nonsense. Lauren, Natalie began, her voice low but firm. What exactly are you trying to prove here? I don't think he belongs in first class, Lauren replied, her tone defensive. Something doesn't add up. Natalie sighed heavily, pinching the bridge of her nose. We've already verified his ticket, his ID, and everything else. If you continue this, you're not following protocol, you're harassing a passenger. Lauren's lips tightened, but she didn't back down. I just want to be sure. What if he's using someone else's ticket? It happens. Natalie's patience snapped. Enough. Return to your duties and leave the man alone. This is not the kind of professionalism we stand for. But Lauren's stubbornness had taken root. As Natalie walked away to address another matter, Lauren made a decision that would escalate the situation further. Moments later, Lauren marched back into the first-class cabin, her expression resolute. She stopped at Malcolm's row, her stance firm and commanding. Sir, she began, her voice louder than before, I need you to move to an available seat in economy class until we can fully verify your ticket. The statement caused an immediate stir. Heads turned, and murmurs rippled through the cabin. Malcolm looked up slowly, his sharp gaze meeting Lauren's without flinching. Excuse me, he said, his tone calm but laced with quiet authority. I'm sorry, but until we can confirm everything, I need you to move, Lauren repeated, her voice faltering slightly under Malcolm's unwavering stare. Malcolm set his pen down and leaned back in his seat, his composure unshaken. And what exactly do you believe needs further confirmation? My ticket was scanned at the gate, my ID was checked, and I've complied with every request made of me. Lauren hesitated, but before she could respond, David Mitchell stood up abruptly, his expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. This is outrageous, David said, his voice carrying through the cabin. You're asking a retired general and philanthropist to move because you don't think he belongs? Do you realize how absurd that sounds? Several passengers nodded in agreement, their expressions turning sympathetic. A woman in the second row turned to her companion and whispered, This is ridiculous. He hasn't done anything wrong. The commotion brought Natalie rushing back into the cabin. Her eyes darted between Lauren and Malcolm, immediately assessing the situation. What's going on here? Natalie demanded, her voice sharp. Lauren hesitated, but Malcolm spoke first. Apparently, I'm being asked to move to economy because my presence here doesn't align with Ms. Evans's assumptions. Natalie's face flushed with embarrassment as she turned to Lauren. Lauren, this is unacceptable. You're overstepping your authority. I was just trying to follow up, Lauren began, but Natalie cut her off. No, you were not. This ends now. Turning to Malcolm, Natalie lowered her voice. Mr. Turner, I deeply apologize for this disturbance. Please know that this does not reflect the values of our airline. Malcolm inclined his head slightly. Apology accepted. I trust this matter is resolved. It is, Natalie assured him, her tone resolute. Then, addressing Lauren, she added, We'll discuss this further after the flight. For now, return to the galley. As Lauren retreated, the atmosphere in the cabin remained tense. Several passengers voiced their discontent, their whispers growing louder. This is insane, David muttered as he sat back down. I fly this airline frequently, and I've never seen anything like this. The woman in the second row turned to Malcolm. Sir, I'm so sorry you're going through this. It's completely unfair. Malcolm offered a faint smile. Thank you. Your kindness is appreciated. As the flight progressed, the retired general's thoughts shifted from the gala to the unsettling events unfolding around him. The behavior he had witnessed was troubling, yet not unfamiliar. As a black man, even one with a decorated military career, respect was often conditional, tied to assumptions and prejudices that refused to fade with time. The seasoned leader leaned back in his seat, his fingers tracing absent-mindedly over the smooth leather of his journal. His mind wandered to the countless soldiers he had once commanded, men and women who had faced similar challenges, enduring discrimination despite their sacrifices. For General Turner, this moment was not just about him. It was a stark reminder of the broader battles that still needed to be fought. The remainder of the flight passed without further incident, but the tension lingered in the cabin. Maintaining his composure, Malcolm focused on the journal resting on his lap, jotting down thoughts that would later shape his advocacy. Across the aisle, David Mitchell leaned in slightly, his voice low and measured. "General Turner," the businessman began, "I hope you'll consider taking action against this airline. What happened today isn't right." The retired general regarded David thoughtfully, his gaze steady. "Perhaps," he replied, "but sometimes addressing the root cause requires more than immediate action." David nodded, sensing the weight of Malcolm's reflection. The journey might have been nearing its end, but for the decorated veteran, it marked the beginning of something far greater. The seatbelt sign turned off as the plane reached cruising altitude. The hum of the engines was steady, almost soothing, but the tension lingering in the first-class cabin was anything but calm. General Turner sat in his seat, his journal closed on the tray table before him. His gaze rested momentarily on the passing clouds, but his thoughts were a whirl of reflection and strategy. Across the aisle, David Mitchell fidgeted with his tablet, stealing occasional glances at the retired general as if debating whether to speak again. Lauren Evans, now confined to the galley, leaned against the counter with crossed arms. Her frustration was palpable, but she avoided eye contact with Natalie, whose stern expression radiated authority. Natalie busied herself with passenger requests, her professionalism unwavering, though her mind was clearly occupied with how to address Lauren's behavior once the plane landed. Whispers between passengers in first class grew louder, their tones ranging from curiosity to outright indignation. A woman in her 60s, seated 2 rows ahead of General Turner, turned to her husband. "Did you hear what the flight attendant said?" she whispered. "She asked him to move to economy. It's appalling." Her husband nodded grimly. "I've never seen anything like it. What could she possibly think he's done wrong?" The murmurs spread like wildfire, reaching beyond first class and into the economy cabin, where passengers craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the commotion. The situation had become impossible to ignore, and it was only a matter of time before someone decided to act. David Mitchell leaned forward, lowering his voice so only General Turner could hear. "General Turner," he began hesitantly, "I know you've handled this with incredible poise, but have you considered addressing this publicly? What's happening here isn't just wrong. It's systemic." The general turned to him, his expression thoughtful. "And what would that accomplish?" David gestured subtly toward the murmuring passengers. "You've already got an audience. People are seeing this for what it is. If you were to speak out, on this flight, or afterward, it could spark a conversation that goes beyond today." Malcolm remained silent for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as he weighed David's words. His instinct was to act with caution, to avoid unnecessary escalation, but the truth lingered in the back of his mind. David was right. This wasn't just about him. As if on cue, Samantha approached Malcolm's seat, her expression soft and apologetic. "Mr. Turner," she said quietly, her voice low enough not to disturb the other passengers, "I wanted to say I'm deeply sorry for what's happened. This isn't who we are as a crew, and it's certainly not who we should be as an airline." Malcolm looked up at her, his tone measured. "Your kindness is appreciated, but the actions of one person can often overshadow the goodwill of many." Samantha nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. "You're absolutely right, sir. I just want you to know that some of us are on your side." The general offered her a faint smile. "Thank you. It means more than you know." Back in the galley, Lauren paced like a caged animal. She couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that she was right, that something about General Turner was off. Her frustration boiled over, and she grabbed her phone, intending to report the situation to the airline's ground team before landing. But Natalie intercepted her. "What are you doing, Lauren?" she demanded, her tone sharp. Lauren froze, clutching her phone tightly. "I'm documenting this. If something goes wrong, it'll be on record." Natalie's eyes narrowed. "Lauren, you've done enough damage already. If you make one more mistake, it won't just be on record, it'll be on you. Now put that away and focus on your job." Lauren hesitated, her defiance faltering under Natalie's withering glare. Reluctantly, she slid her phone back into her pocket and returned to her duties, though her frustration remained evident. Near the end of the flight, Natalie approached Lauren in the galley. Her tone was low, but her words carried weight. "Lauren, I've documented everything that's happened today. Expect to hear from management when we land." Lauren's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't respond. The reality of her actions was beginning to sink in, though her stubborn pride refused to let her admit it. Malcolm Turner decided to act, not through confrontation, but through presence. He stood up, stretching briefly before moving toward the galley. The passengers watched him curiously, their whispers silencing as he passed. At the galley, he found Samantha and Natalie. "I'd like to speak with Lauren," he said simply. Natalie hesitated, her brow furrowing. "Are you sure? You don't have to." "I'd prefer it," Malcolm interrupted gently. "If she's willing to listen, perhaps we can resolve this before we land." Lauren stood stiffly as General Turner approached, her expression guarded. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence stretching between them like a taut string. Finally, Malcolm broke the silence. "Ms. Evans," he began, his tone calm but firm, "I understand that you've had concerns about my presence in first class. I'd like to know why." Lauren swallowed hard, her composure wavering. I just thought," she paused, struggling to find the words. "You didn't seem like I belong?" Malcolm finished for her, his gaze unwavering. Lauren's cheeks flushed, but she didn't deny it. "I didn't mean to." The general raised a hand, stopping her. "Intentions matter, but so do actions. You've made assumptions about me based on appearances, and those assumptions led to actions that disrupted this flight and disrespected me as a passenger." Lauren's shoulders sagged, and for the first time, her defiance gave way to something resembling regret. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Malcolm nodded slowly. "Then perhaps we can agree that next time, judgment should be reserved until all the facts are known." Lauren nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I'm sorry," she said softly. The retired general offered a brief nod of acknowledgement before turning to make his way back to his seat. As he settled in, David Mitchell, seated across the aisle, gave him a subtle nod of approval, his expression reflecting admiration for the dignified way Malcolm had handled the situation. Malcolm, as always, remained composed, his focus now returning to the journal resting on his tray table. As the plane began its descent, the cabin crew prepared for landing. Samantha passed by General Turner's seat one last time, offering him a warm smile. "Thank you for your patience, sir, and for handling everything so gracefully." The general inclined his head with a faint smile. "Patience isn't just a virtue, it's a necessity." As the wheels touched down, Malcolm Turner's thoughts shifted firmly to the gala awaiting him in Los Angeles. The anticipation of addressing an audience dedicated to supporting veterans filled him with purpose. The events of the flight were behind him now, dismissed with the discipline and focus he had honed over decades. This was more than just a speech. It was an opportunity to inspire, to share his vision, and to further the mission that had become his life's work. He adjusted the edge of his navy blazer slightly, smoothing it over his shoulders as he prepared to disembark. Carefully, the retired general closed his leather-bound journal, tucking it securely into his briefcase. The plane had landed at San Francisco International Airport, San Francisco Airport, and the passengers began to disembark. The tension from the earlier incidents still lingered, though a semblance of calm had returned to the cabin. Malcolm Turner rose from his seat, his movements deliberate and measured, as though every action carried the weight of his decades in uniform. Across the aisle, David Mitchell stood as well, his expression thoughtful. "General Turner," he said softly, extending a hand, "if there's anything I can do to support you after this, please don't hesitate to let me know." Malcolm clasped David's hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Your support today was more meaningful than you realize." As the two men exchanged parting words, Lauren Evans lingered near the galley, avoiding eye contact with Malcolm as he walked toward the exit. Natalie, however, stepped forward, her face a mask of professionalism. "Mr. Turner," she began, her voice steady, "on behalf of our airline, I'd like to offer our sincerest apologies. This situation should never have occurred." Malcolm paused, his gaze steady as he replied, "Apologies are appreciated, but actions speak louder. I hope this airline takes today's events as an opportunity to reflect and improve." Natalie nodded solemnly, clearly understanding the weight of his words. "We will, sir. Thank you for your patience." As Malcolm stepped into the terminal, He was greeted by the usual bustling energy of LAX. But as he moved toward the baggage claim, a surprising sight awaited him. A small crowd of reporters with cameras and microphones poised. Word of the incident had spread quickly, thanks to passengers who had recorded parts of the confrontation and posted them on social media. The videos, accompanied by captions like "discrimination in first class" and "veteran humiliated on flight," had gone viral within hours. "General Turner, over here," one reporter called out, pushing through the crowd. "Can you comment on what happened during your flight? Do you believe you were targeted because of your race?" Another shouted, her microphone extended toward him. Malcolm stopped, his calm demeanor unshaken despite the barrage of questions. Raising a hand, he signaled for quiet. The reporters fell silent, their attention riveted. "I will say this," Malcolm began, his voice steady but firm. "Today's incident was unfortunate, but it reflects a broader issue that extends beyond me. As a retired Army general and a veteran, I've spent my life fighting for fairness, dignity, and respect, not just for myself, but for everyone. This experience is a reminder of the work we still need to do to ensure those values are upheld in every corner of our society." The crowd murmured, impressed by his composure and eloquence. Cameras clicked rapidly, capturing his resolute expression. Malcolm offered no further comment, instead continuing toward the baggage claim with the same quiet dignity that had defined him throughout the flight. At the baggage claim, Malcolm was joined by David Mitchell, who had waited to ensure his new acquaintance didn't face the media alone. "Quite a reception," David remarked, his tone wry. Malcolm nodded. "It's not the kind of attention I seek, but if it helps shine a light on the issue, then so be it." David considered this for a moment before speaking again. "General, I'm not just a businessman. I've worked in public relations for years. If you're open to it, I'd like to help you navigate what's coming next. The media storm is only beginning." Malcolm regarded David thoughtfully. "Your offer is generous, Mr. Mitchell. Let me think on it." David smiled. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Meanwhile, back at the airline's headquarters, the video of the incident had reached senior executives. A hastily organized emergency meeting convened to discuss the public backlash. "This is a PR nightmare," one executive said, pacing the room. "We've got to issue a statement immediately." "We need more than a statement," another chimed in. "We need action." The passenger in question is General Malcolm Turner, a decorated veteran and a public figure. "If we don't handle this properly, it could damage our reputation permanently." The CEO, a composed woman in her early 60s, raised a hand to silence the room. "Enough. We'll issue an apology and reach out to General Turner directly. But more importantly, we need to address the root cause of this incident. It's not just about one flight or one passenger. It's about ensuring our policies and training prevent something like this from happening again." In the same meeting, Natalie's report about Lauren Evans was reviewed. The decision was made to suspend Lauren immediately, pending a formal investigation. She would also be required to complete comprehensive retraining programs if she hoped to return to work. "We need to send a clear message," the CEO said. "This kind of behavior will not be tolerated. Let the public know we are taking this seriously." 2 days after the flight landed, Skyline Airways wasted no time in addressing the incident. Lauren Evans was called into a meeting with senior management, and the airline released a statement to the passengers involved. Skyline Airways apologizes unreservedly for the incident that occurred on Flight 782. "We have placed the employee involved under suspension while we conduct a thorough investigation." The statement continued, "We take matters of respect and professionalism seriously. Actions that undermine our values will not be tolerated. Our goal is to ensure every passenger feels valued and respected while traveling with us." Meanwhile, Lauren sat alone in a small meeting room at the airline's headquarters, her confidence visibly shaken. Natalie had already provided a detailed account of the events, along with the reports filed by other crew members and passenger statements. The airline announced their findings publicly, stating that Lauren had violated company protocols and failed to uphold the standard of service expected of their employees. By the end of the week, Lauren received formal notice of disciplinary action. Her employment with Skyline Airways was terminated, and she was barred from future employment within the airline network. and required to complete a series of mandatory training programs on customer service, anti-discrimination policies, and conflict resolution. While some members of the public called for harsher punishment, Malcolm privately requested that Skyline Airways focus on education and reform rather than punitive measures. Change comes not from punishment alone, he told the airline's leadership, but from creating opportunities for growth. A representative for the airline later reached out to Malcolm Turner to inform him of the resolution and reiterated their commitment to preventing similar incidents in the future. Later that evening, Malcolm sat in his hotel room, gazing out at the Los Angeles skyline. The gala awaited him, but his mind was preoccupied with the events of the day. The media attention, while overwhelming, presented an opportunity, a chance to advocate for the values he had always championed. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Picking it up, he saw a flood of messages from friends, colleagues, and even strangers offering their support. Among them was a text from David Mitchell. "General, if you're willing, I'd like to help you turn today's challenge into a platform for change. Call me anytime." Malcolm smiled faintly, setting the phone down. The road ahead would not be easy, but it was one he was prepared to walk. As Malcolm prepared for the gala, he added one final note to his speech. True leadership is not about avoiding challenges, but about facing them with courage and conviction. Today reminded me of that truth. The night would be about celebrating veterans and their sacrifices, but Malcolm knew it was also the beginning of a broader fight, a fight for dignity and respect for all. The ballroom of the Los Angeles Grand Hotel was a spectacle of elegance. Chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables adorned with pristine white linens and centerpieces of fresh roses. The hum of conversations filled the air as veterans, philanthropists, and community leaders gathered for the annual gala supporting veterans' education and mental health programs. Malcolm Turner stepped into the room, his tall frame cutting an imposing figure in a tailored black suit. The earlier events on the flight had left their mark on his thoughts, but he wore his usual calm expression, his demeanor as steady as ever. As he made his way through the crowd, numerous hands reached out to shake his, accompanied by warm words of admiration. Malcolm's reputation as a steadfast advocate for veterans preceded him, and tonight, he was the guest of honor. Yet, amidst the warm welcome, a subtle undercurrent of curiosity about the viral video lingered in some interactions. The MC for the evening, a charismatic woman in her 40s, stepped onto the stage to begin the program. After welcoming the attendees, she introduced Malcolm with a glowing biography that highlighted his military career, philanthropic work, and unwavering commitment to justice. Malcolm approached the podium to a standing ovation. As the applause died down, he took a moment to scan the room, his gaze resting briefly on the faces of fellow veterans seated near the stage. "Good evening," Malcolm began, his deep voice resonating across the room. "Tonight, we gather to celebrate those who have served our nation and to recommit ourselves to ensuring their sacrifices are never forgotten." He paused, his gaze steady. "But as we celebrate, we must also reflect. Earlier today, I was reminded of how far we still have to go, not just in supporting veterans, but in creating a society where dignity and respect are extended to all." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the audience. Malcolm shared a measured account of the incident on the flight, careful not to sensationalize, but to illustrate the broader issue of prejudice and assumptions. The incident, which had already become a viral story on social media, served as a stark reminder of the inequalities still embedded in society. Guests in the room were familiar with the videos and headlines. Terms like discrimination and bias had been attached to the event, spurring public outrage. Malcolm knew his words carried the weight of these expectations, but he focused instead on the opportunity for systemic change. "This is not about one airline or one flight," he continued. "It's about the culture we cultivate as a society. A culture where appearances can override accomplishments. A culture where judgment can eclipse humanity. And that is why we are here, to ensure that our actions reflect our values." The audience responded with resounding applause, their standing ovation lasting several minutes. Malcolm's words had struck a chord, transforming what could have been a celebratory speech into a rallying cry for change. As the dinner progressed, Malcolm found himself approached by individuals moved by his speech. Among them was Rebecca Thompson, a senior executive at the airline responsible for the earlier incident. She had flown to Los Angeles specifically to attend the gala after learning about Malcolm's ordeal. General Turner, Rebecca began, extending her hand. I'm Rebecca Thompson, the Vice President of Corporate Communications for Skyline Airways. I want to personally apologize for what happened today. Malcolm shook her hand firmly, his expression measured. Your presence here is noted, Ms. Thompson, but apologies without action rarely lead to change. Rebecca nodded, clearly expecting his response. You're absolutely right, and that's why I'm here. We've already begun taking steps to address the issue, but we'd like to do more with your guidance. If you're willing, we'd like to partner with your foundation to create programs that support veterans and promote diversity within our company. Rebecca's journey to this decision hadn't been easy. In the days following the flight, Skyline Airways had been inundated with criticism. Internal meetings had grown tense as executives debated how to respond. For Rebecca, the answer was clear: genuine accountability. We cannot fix this by words alone, she had argued to the board. We need to demonstrate that we've learned and are committed to change. Malcolm regarded her thoughtfully. That's a significant offer. I'll need to see the details before agreeing, but if your intentions are genuine, this could be a step in the right direction. Rebecca smiled, relieved. Thank you, General Turner. We'll be in touch. The rest of the evening unfolded with a renewed sense of purpose among the attendees. Malcolm's speech had set the tone, prompting discussions about advocacy and action. Several donors approached him with offers to increase their contributions to his foundation, inspired by his commitment to turning challenges into opportunities for change. One donor, a prominent business leader, expressed a particular interest in supporting the foundation's scholarship fund for the children of veterans. General Turner, she said warmly, your vision is truly inspiring. Education is the key to breaking cycles of hardship. Please count me in for a significant contribution to ensure these families have every opportunity to succeed. Malcolm's gratitude was evident as he replied, Thank you. Every child deserves the chance to dream and achieve, especially those who carry the legacy of service and sacrifice. Your generosity will make a real difference. David Mitchell, who had joined the gala at Malcolm's invitation, watched the evening unfold with admiration. As the crowd began to thin, he approached Malcolm with a glass of champagne in hand. General Turner, David said with a smile, you've turned a difficult day into a powerful moment. That's no small feat. Malcolm chuckled softly. It's not about me, David. It's about what we can do together. Today was a reminder that leadership isn't confined to titles or positions. It's about taking responsibility and creating a better path for others. David raised his glass. To the work ahead. Malcolm clinked his glass lightly against David's. To the work that matters. As the night progressed, Malcolm reflected on the power of collective action. The contributions made tonight would not only provide scholarships but also symbolize the broader mission of his foundation: to honor service, foster opportunity, and inspire hope. As the evening came to a close, Malcolm stepped outside into the cool Los Angeles night. The lights of the city sparkled in the distance, a stark contrast to the quiet contemplation settling over him. His phone buzzed, and he saw an email from Rebecca Thompson detailing the proposed partnership between Skyline Airways and his foundation. Attached was a preliminary plan outlining scholarships for veterans, diversity training for employees, and a significant donation to mental health programs. The proposal included detailed timelines, transparent funding allocations, and metrics for measuring success. Rebecca had emphasized that these programs would be implemented with input from veterans themselves, ensuring that their voices shaped every step of the process. Malcolm read the email carefully, his mind already considering the possibilities. The airline's gesture, if sincere, could create meaningful change, not just for their company, but for the countless veterans who deserved better opportunities. As Malcolm returned to his hotel room, he opened his journal and jotted down a single thought. Leadership is not about perfection, it's about progress. And progress begins with the courage to confront what needs to change. The night had been a turning point, not just for Malcolm, but for everyone involved. The road ahead would be long, but it was one worth traveling. The following morning, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Malcolm Turner's hotel room. He stood near the desk, holding a cup of coffee as he reread the detailed proposal from Skyline Airways. The document outlined plans for scholarships for veterans' children, job opportunities for transitioning service members, and mandatory diversity training for all employees. Malcolm's years of leadership had taught him to approach offers like this with caution. The airline's motives could be genuine, but there was always the possibility of them using the partnership as a public relations move to repair their damaged image. He would need assurances that this was not merely an empty gesture. Malcolm dialed David Mitchell, who had offered his support during the previous day's events. Within moments, David's voice came through the line, warm and enthusiastic. "General Turner, good morning. I trust you're calling with good news?" Malcolm chuckled softly. "Morning, David. I wouldn't say good news just yet, but I do have something to discuss. The airline has proposed a partnership with my foundation. They're offering funding for scholarships, job training programs, and diversity initiatives." "That sounds promising," David replied, "but you don't sound convinced." "It's a significant gesture," Malcolm said, "but I need to ensure it's more than just a PR stunt. I'd like your input on how to navigate this." David's tone turned thoughtful. "If they're serious, they'll agree to transparency and measurable outcomes. Let's meet with them and establish clear expectations. If done right, this could be a game changer, not just for veterans, but for the industry as a whole." 3 days later, Malcolm and David met with Rebecca Thompson and several senior executives from Skyline Airways at a private conference room in downtown Los Angeles. The room was modern and bright, but the atmosphere was thick with the weight of unspoken tension. Rebecca began the meeting with a direct acknowledgement. "General Turner, Mr. Mitchell, thank you for meeting with us. Before we begin, let me say this. What happened on your flight was unacceptable. We failed to uphold the standards we set for ourselves as a company, and for that, we take full responsibility." Malcolm nodded, his expression calm but measured. Acknowledging the issue is the first step, but words alone won't fix what's broken. Rebecca leaned forward, her tone earnest. "We agree. That's why we're proposing a partnership with your foundation. We want to invest in scholarships, create job opportunities for veterans, and overhaul our employee training to include comprehensive diversity education." David interjected, his voice firm but professional. "These are commendable goals, but we'll need concrete commitments. Funding levels, timelines, metrics for success. Everything must be transparent. General Turner isn't interested in empty gestures." Rebecca met David's gaze without flinching. "Understood. We're prepared to provide detailed documentation and regular updates to ensure accountability." Over the next hour, the two sides engaged in a productive discussion, outlining specific steps for the proposed initiatives. Malcolm insisted on including veterans in the planning process, ensuring their voices were heard at every stage. One of the key agreements was the creation of a comprehensive program called Wings for Veterans. This initiative aimed to address multiple areas of need for veterans and their families. First, it included a commitment to providing $5 million in scholarships to support the education of veterans' children, ensuring they have the resources to pursue their academic goals. Additionally, the program sought to establish job placement opportunities within the airline and its industry partners, creating pathways for veterans to transition smoothly into civilian careers. To foster a more inclusive workplace, it would also implement mandatory diversity training, developed in collaboration with Malcolm's foundation, to educate employees and promote understanding. Lastly, recognizing the emotional challenges faced by veterans, the program pledged to sponsor mental health workshops and support groups tailored to help them navigate the complexities of reintegration into civilian life. As the meeting concluded, Rebecca extended her hand to Malcolm. "Thank you for giving us the opportunity to make this right. We promise to uphold our commitments." Malcolm shook her hand firmly. "This is a step in the right direction. Let's ensure it's the first of many." In the weeks that followed, the partnership was formally announced at a press conference. Malcolm stood alongside Skyline Airways executives as they unveiled the Wings for Veterans initiative. The event attracted significant media attention, turning the incident into a catalyst for meaningful change. During his speech, Malcolm addressed the crowd with his usual eloquence. "Today, we take a step forward, not just as individuals, but as a society. This partnership is not about one airline or one foundation. It's about creating opportunities and fostering understanding for those who have given so much for our country. The audience responded with thunderous applause, and journalists scrambled to capture his every word. What could have been a moment of humiliation had become a platform for transformation. The initiative received widespread praise, particularly from veterans organizations and advocacy groups. Social media buzzed with messages of support, many lauding Malcolm's ability to turn adversity into action. However, there were skeptics who questioned the airline's motives. Some accused Skyline Airways of using the initiative as a way to divert attention from their mistakes. Malcolm addressed these concerns head-on during an interview with a major news network. "I understand the skepticism," he said, "but my focus is on the outcomes. If this partnership improves the lives of veterans and their families, then it's worth pursuing. Actions speak louder than intentions." His candid response resonated with viewers, further solidifying his reputation as a principled leader. As the Wings for Veterans program gained momentum, other companies began reaching out to Malcolm's foundation with similar proposals. A tech firm offered to sponsor coding boot camps for veterans, while a retail giant pledged to hire more service members transitioning to civilian life. Malcolm, ever mindful of the bigger picture, saw these developments as an opportunity to expand the foundation's reach. He assembled a team of advisors, including David Mitchell, to manage the growing number of partnerships and ensure each initiative stayed true to its mission. One evening, as Malcolm sat in his office reviewing the latest updates on the scholarship applications, his phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca Thompson. "General Turner, the first mental health workshop for veterans has been scheduled for next month. Thank you for making this possible." Malcolm set the phone down, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over him. The road ahead would still be challenging, but moments like this reminded him why the journey was worth it. He picked up his journal and wrote a single line. "Progress is made not in the absence of challenges, but in how we rise to meet them." Months had passed since the viral incident and the subsequent launch of the Wings for Veterans initiative. What had begun as a turbulent flight for Malcolm Turner had transformed into a movement that reverberated far beyond the airline industry. The partnership between Malcolm's foundation and Skyline Airways was flourishing, but the momentum it created had inspired other sectors to join the cause. Malcolm's days were now filled with meetings, speeches, and correspondence. His office, located in a modest yet functional building near Washington, D.C., was bustling with activity. A dedicated team worked tirelessly to manage the growing number of projects, ensuring that every commitment was honored. David Mitchell, now serving as an advisor to Malcolm's foundation, entered the office carrying a folder brimming with proposals. He placed it on Malcolm's desk with a satisfied grin. "General Turner," David began, "we've received interest from 3 new companies this week. One is a logistics firm looking to employ veterans as operations managers. Another is a healthcare company offering free mental health services. And this," he said, pointing to the top of the folder, "is a tech company proposing to sponsor training programs for veterans transitioning into cybersecurity." Malcolm leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. It's encouraging to see this level of interest, but with growth comes responsibility. We need to ensure these partnerships are more than just good intentions. They must deliver real results. "That's why we're here," David replied. "Your leadership ensures that every initiative stays true to its purpose." Malcolm nodded, appreciating David's confidence. "Let's prioritize the proposals based on their potential impact and scalability. We can't spread ourselves too thin." The Foundation's project management team, composed of veterans and civilians alike, worked tirelessly to evaluate each proposal. Their collaborative approach ensured that every project aligned with the Foundation's mission and could be implemented effectively. Malcolm had always believed in empowering others, and this team embodied his vision for shared leadership. One afternoon, Malcolm received an unexpected visitor at his office, Rebecca Thompson. Since their initial meeting, her involvement in the Wings for Veterans program had been consistent, but this visit carried a different tone. "General Turner," Rebecca said as she stepped into his office, "I wanted to thank you personally. The partnership with your foundation has not only improved lives, but also transformed our company's culture." Malcolm gestured for her to sit. "That's good to hear, Ms. Thompson, but there's still much work to be done." Rebecca nodded. "That's why I'm here. We've seen the success of the scholarships and job placements, but I believe we can go further. I'd like to propose expanding the mental health workshops to include families of veterans. They often bear the unseen burdens of service, and I think we can make a difference." Malcolm's expression softened. "That's an insightful proposal. Families are the backbone of every service member's journey. Let's explore how we can make that happen." Rebecca continued, "Our research shows that when families are supported, veterans are more likely to succeed in reintegration. We'd like to create tailored workshops for spouses and children, focusing on coping strategies and community-building activities." Malcolm nodded. "That aligns perfectly with our mission. Let's gather the data and pilot a few programs before scaling." As the initiatives grew, so did the scrutiny. While many praised Malcolm's work, others questioned whether the partnerships were sustainable or if corporations were using them for publicity. Critics argued that the programs needed independent oversight to ensure accountability. Malcolm took these concerns seriously. He convened a meeting with his advisory team to address the issue. "We've come a long way," Malcolm began, "but public trust is fragile. To maintain it, we need transparency. I want quarterly reports on every program's progress, and I want those reports to be made public." David agreed. "That's a smart move. It'll show people that we're not just talking about change, we're delivering it." Malcolm's team quickly implemented a system for tracking outcomes, from the number of scholarships awarded to the success rates of job placements. The first report, published online, included testimonials from veterans who had benefited from the programs. The reports were accompanied by infographics and real-time updates on the Foundation's website, allowing donors and the public to track progress. Malcolm also hosted monthly webinars to answer questions and engage directly with stakeholders, further solidifying trust in the Foundation's mission. One such testimonial came from a young man named Diego Ramirez, a former Marine who had struggled to find his footing after leaving the military. Through the Wings for Veterans initiative, Diego received a scholarship to study aviation mechanics and later secured a position with Skyline Airways. "I went from feeling lost to finding a purpose again," Diego wrote in his testimonial. "This program didn't just give me a job, it gave me a future." Stories like Diego's began to surface across the country, each one adding to the growing impact of Malcolm's work. News outlets picked up on the success stories, further amplifying the message. Malcolm was invited to deliver the keynote speech at a national conference on Veterans Affairs. The event, attended by policymakers, business leaders, and nonprofit organizations, was a platform for sharing best practices and exploring new strategies to support veterans. Standing at the podium, Malcolm addressed the audience with his characteristic blend of humility and authority. "Today, we're not just talking about what veterans need," he began. "We're demonstrating what's possible when we come together with a shared purpose. The initiatives we've launched are proof that progress is achievable, but they are only the beginning." Malcolm emphasized the importance of collaboration, urging attendees to think beyond their individual organizations and consider the broader impact of their efforts. "When we focus on lifting each other up," he concluded, "we create a society that honors not just the sacrifices of our veterans, but the values they fought to protect." The audience erupted into applause, a standing ovation that underscored the significance of his words. After his speech, Malcolm stayed to engage with attendees, answering questions and exchanging ideas. Several representatives from other organizations expressed interest in adopting similar models for their own veteran programs, marking a new chapter in the initiative's expansion. As Malcolm returned to his seat, a young woman approached him, her expression earnest. "General Turner," she said, "my father is a veteran, and your work has inspired me to start my own nonprofit. I just wanted to thank you for showing us what's possible." Malcolm smiled warmly. "The credit belongs to everyone who believes in making a difference. Keep pushing forward. You'll do great things." The exchange was brief, but it encapsulated the essence of Malcolm's mission, to inspire and empower others to carry the torch of change. That evening, Malcolm returned to his office, reflecting on the day's events. The initiatives had grown far beyond what he initially imagined, but he knew the work was far from over. As he opened his journal, he wrote, "True progress is not measured by what we achieve alone, but by how we inspire others to achieve alongside us." He closed the journal with a sense of quiet resolve. The journey ahead would be challenging, but he welcomed it with open arms. Malcolm Turner leaned back in his chair, the early morning sunlight casting long shadows across his office. The months since the fateful flight had been a whirlwind of activity, progress, and reflection. What had begun as a moment of indignity had blossomed into a movement that transcended industries, inspiring not just veterans but entire communities. Malcolm's desk was covered with reports and proposals, each representing a new initiative sparked by the Wings for Veterans program. Yet, amidst the steady hum of productivity, Malcolm knew the work was never truly complete. An email from the Department of Veterans Affairs landed in Malcolm's inbox that morning, inviting him to deliver the keynote address at the National Veterans Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. The event would bring together policymakers, corporate leaders, and nonprofit organizations to discuss solutions for improving the lives of American veterans. Malcolm forwarded the email to David Mitchell with a simple note. Thoughts? Minutes later, David appeared at Malcolm's door, a grin on his face. This is a huge opportunity, General. The summit is where the most influential voices in veterans affairs converge. If we present the Wings for Veterans program as a scalable model, it could set a new standard nationwide. Malcolm nodded. Agreed. But we need to focus on action, not just recognition. Veterans face challenges that go beyond borders, and this summit could be a stepping stone to broader collaboration. Malcolm added, I've also noticed a few international representatives on the guest list, delegates from Canada, the UK, and Australia. If they're interested in what we're doing, it could open doors for collaboration beyond the US. The weeks leading up to the summit were a flurry of activity. Malcolm's team worked tirelessly to compile data, gather testimonials, and prepare a presentation that would highlight the program's successes while addressing its potential for broader application. Rebecca Thompson, who had remained a steadfast partner in the Wings for Veterans program, reached out to offer her company's support. Skyline Airways would like to sponsor part of the summit's logistics and showcase the program as a model for corporate responsibility, she said during a conference call. Malcolm agreed, with a condition. The focus must remain on the veterans and their families. This isn't about promoting the airline, it's about impact. Rebecca readily agreed, understanding the importance of Malcolm's vision. The Grand Hall at the Washington Convention Center buzzed with energy as veterans, policymakers, and advocates gathered for the summit. The event featured panels, workshops, and networking sessions aimed at addressing pressing issues in veterans affairs. As the keynote speaker, Malcolm took the stage to a round of applause. The room fell silent as he began. Good afternoon. Today, we gather not just as individuals representing our organizations, but as stewards of those who have served our nation with unwavering dedication. Malcolm spoke about the Wings for Veterans program, sharing its successes and the lessons learned. He highlighted stories like Diego Ramirez's, emphasizing the transformative power of education, employment, and mental health support. One challenge that knows no borders is PTSD, Malcolm stated. This is not just an issue for veterans in America, it's a global problem. By prioritizing mental health resources and fostering collaboration, we can create a system that empowers veterans everywhere to heal and thrive. The audience responded with a standing ovation, inspired by Malcolm's words and vision. After his speech, Malcolm attended a networking session where he engaged with delegates from other countries. A representative from Canada shared insights about their national veteran mental health programs, while a delegate from Australia expressed interest in learning more about the Wings for Veterans model. During one conversation, a UK representative proposed the idea of hosting a joint workshop between organizations in their country and the Wings for Veterans team. Our challenges are remarkably similar, she said. If we can pool our knowledge and resources, the impact could be profound. Malcolm agreed. Collaboration is the key. Let's start with a workshop and build from there. Upon returning to the Foundation's office, Malcolm was greeted by his team with news of additional milestones. The first round of scholarships funded by the Wings for Veterans program had been awarded, and the recipients included children of service members who had long struggled to access higher education. One of the recipients, a young woman named Sophia Ramirez, wrote a heartfelt letter to Malcolm. Dear General Turner, thanks to your program, I'm starting my first semester at college next month. My father always said education is the greatest gift, and now, because of you, I have the chance to achieve my dreams. Thank you for believing in families like mine. Malcolm read the letter twice, the corners of his mouth lifting into a rare, genuine smile. It was moments like these that reminded him why the work mattered. As the movement grew, so did the complexity of managing its impact. Malcolm knew it was time to secure the foundation's future beyond his leadership. During a meeting with David and other key Lauren, I've documented everything that's happened today. Expect to hear from management when we land advisors. He proposed a plan to establish a permanent advisory board composed of veterans, corporate partners, and nonprofit leaders. This isn't about me, Malcolm explained. The foundation needs to outlast my involvement. It needs to belong to the people it serves. The team agreed, and over the next few months, the advisory board was formed. Its members included David Mitchell, Rebecca Thompson, and Diego Ramirez, among others. Each brought unique perspectives and expertise, ensuring the foundation's mission would remain strong. In the years that followed, the Wings for Veterans initiative became a model for collaboration between corporations, nonprofits, and governments. Its programs expanded to include housing support, entrepreneurial training, and international exchange opportunities for veterans. Malcolm, though stepping back from day-to-day operations, remained an active mentor and advocate. His influence extended far and wide, inspiring a new generation of leaders to carry the torch of change. One evening, as Malcolm sat in his study, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. Opening his journal, he wrote one final entry. Leadership is not about the battles we fight, but the futures we build. And those futures belong to the ones who dare to dream beyond themselves. As he closed the journal, Malcolm felt a profound sense of peace. His work was far from finished, but the foundation had been laid. The movement was in motion, and its momentum was unstoppable. We'd love to hear your thoughts and personal stories. Have you, or someone you know, ever faced a similar situation? Share your experiences and advice in the comments below. Together, we can raise awareness and inspire change, making every journey a fair and respectful one. Your voice truly matters. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Every subscription is a motivation for me to create more heartfelt and inspiring stories. Thank you for your support.